Today we're going to look at 5 cars that look incredibly good but at the same time drive incredibly well. All 5 are pretty exotic. Let's get straight into it. Oh, and all 5 of these cars are under £50,000. Do hit like and subscribe for 2 videos every single week. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Would you rather have a car that looks good or drives good? I want to hear your thoughts. Let's kick this video off with my favourite car on the list, a car that I'm very keen to own sometime in the future, the Alfa Romeo 4C. When I first had the chance to drive one, I was blown away by how much it felt like a significantly more expensive exotic car experience, but when I lived with one for about 4 months a couple of years ago, it absolutely cemented that fact. People in some other more serious exotic cars would flash or wave as I drove around London in it, people would ask me about it at petrol stations, people would take pictures of it in car parks. It was like I was driving something way more expensive than a cheap little Alfa. And at the same time, it's an incredibly fun car to drive. It can be a bit twitchy given it's on the shorter side, but it's got just the right amount of power to weight to make it fun, and then the lack of power steering means you personally feel so much more connected to the car. These come with the smallest engine on the list, a 1.75 litre turbocharged inline 4 block that makes 236 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 4.4 seconds. Not bad for a car that weighs in at just 940 kilograms. Add on the nice simple interior and the carbon fibre tub that surrounds you, and this car is a seriously cool little exotic car for the money. They'll run you around £36,000 at the bottom end, meaning they've actually corrected again in price recently, and 50k will get you a low mileage model from around 2015. Outside of some poor build issues like bubbling on some of the interior trim, there aren't too many common issues with these. Some actuator and gearbox issues have been known with cars that have been tracked, but again, the one I was driving for a few months had been tracked a fair bit and had a fair few miles for a 4C and had no issues. The one thing that would suck would be cracking of the carbon tub, but that's only happened in very rare instances. I've always been a massive TVR fan since the early days of Jeremy Clarkson videos on cars. I'm talking like mid-90s where he put a TVR Cerberus up against some other supercars in a drag race and it destroyed all of them. And yet it's a brand that doesn't always get much love because of its checkered reliability record and questionable build quality, but when they work they are ludicrously fast. The T350 is basically the baby TVR, yet still maintains that pace. You'll get yourself into a very typical TVR engine with one of these, a 3.6 litre inline 6 that puts up 350 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 4.4 seconds, matching the 4C, which is not that bad for the oldest car on the list by far. And as the oldest car on the list, it somehow still doesn't actually look that old, with a shape that's again pretty typical of TVRs, but more recently used by way more modern cars. I mean, think about the F-Type and the Roma for example. And it was also the basis for the hallowed Sagaris and maintains the standard TVR commitment to zero driver aids or anything really to support passengers. I mean, most don't even seem to come with aircon. But the reason why they can get away with having no driver aids is their handling. They're known to offer amazing feel, a true driving enthusiast car that also has a bunch of road presence. They're listed anywhere from around £33,000, and for 50k you'll be looking at a 2005 model that's done around 20,000 miles. As I mentioned, TVRs are not known for their reliability or build quality really, but the T350s that really caused issues were typically the early models. The biggest problem with the engine in the car was actually resolved before it came to exist though in previous cars, but if you hear tappity noises from the engine it can still be a sign of valve clearances being off. There are also some known gearbox and clutch issues to be aware of as well. When the new Alpine A110 came out I wasn't completely sold on the looks, particularly around the rear, but now that I've let them marinate for a bit they've definitely grown on me. The A110S is a seriously cool piece of kit too, as a rear mid-engine rear wheel drive sports car that is lighter and more powerful than the standard A110. It has stiffer lower springs combined with a whole new set of ARBs, dampers and performance brakes, and the stiffness is literally up to 100% more in some places. The extra power also came from a bigger turbo than the standard car, and it gains peak power 1400 RPMs higher. It also got lighter alloys for some lower unsprung mass, and yet despite that it's almost 200 kilograms heavier than the 4C we just spoke about at 1114 kilograms. This is a pretty direct competitor to the 4C in terms of powertrain and performance too, with that 1.8 litre turbocharged inline 4 that puts out 287 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 4.3 seconds, meaning it has about 40 brake horsepower more than the standard A110, but only gets to 60 0.1 seconds quicker. It also was of course a bit of a tribute to the classic A110 that took part in early World Rally Championships, which is often incorrectly referred to as a tarmac specialist car, when in reality it won WRC rallies in Portugal, Morocco and San Remo, some of the toughest rallies when it comes to mixed surfaces, and it even won the Acropolis, among the toughest off-road rallies out there. Though the new car may look a little bit bit like a tarmac sports car in comparison, it did actually get an A110 Rally Edition for use in European Rally Championships. £41,000 is the minimum you need to spend to get into one of these, and 50k will get you into a 2022 model that's done around 14,000 miles. On reliability, these have been very solid according to owners, and outside of some recalls, they've got no major issues to shout home about. Some owners mention uncomfortable seats which are hard to adjust, but outside of that, owners seem to adore these. So I hope you guys are enjoying this video. If you are, then do hit like and subscribe. 1,000 likes, we do the same video again under £30,000 instead. And don't forget the question in the comments down below, would you rather have a car that looks good or drives good? Getting into a Porsche GT product is a dream for many petrol heads, particularly Porsche fanatics of course, but prices often make that pretty difficult. The fact therefore that you can get into a 981 Cayman GT4 for a hair under 50k makes it have some serious value for money then, as the cheapest modern GT product available. It's a successor to the 987 Cayman R, which provided the formula but maybe wasn't quite as certified as a track focused Porsche as the GT4 is. The GT4 only comes as a manual and has the serious exterior that focuses on cooling and downforce, with that rear wing being the telltale sign. But you could still spec some creature comforts like the comfort seats, which typically make these significantly cheaper. If you don't care about going all out track focused, why not get one with comfort seats and have something cheaper and more usable day to day? This track car for the road comes with a proper Porsche engine, a 3.8 litre flat 6 that makes 379 brake horsepower, the most on this list, taking it to 60 in 4.3 seconds, so the same as the Alpine. But of course, if we're talking about getting around a track, the GT4 is going to be the right choice. But only just, the GT4 did a Nürburgring time of 7 minutes 42.39, and yet with the same driver, the A110S did it in 7 minutes 42.66, so 3/10. It's worth mentioning that it was with the more expensive A110S 300, but either way, pretty close between the two cars. These start at our 50k limit, making the most expensive car on the list, and you'll be looking at a 2016 model with 60,000 miles on the clock for that kind of money. There were some known gearbox issues with these early doors, which meant some spent longer than you'd expect at dealerships, but broadly they've been pretty good on reliability. Instead, owners have sometimes complained about the engine not having any real torque after around 6,500 RPM, particularly noticeable when thrashed around a track, and there have been some complaints on fuel economy, but then it is a track-focused Porsche. Why would you prioritise fuel economy? Though the 4C is my first love, if I was spending the money, there might be a world where I choose to buy the Lotus Exige Sport 350 instead. If you want a proper driver's car that will dominate on track and still turn a bunch of heads out on the roads, the Exige will do a better job than basically all the other cars on this list. It's the Series 3 Exige, and the Sport 350 was the replacement for the S, arriving in 2015 and getting a Roadster example in 2016. It weighs just 11 kilograms more than the A110S, and yet has way more power, as these come with that typical Toyota 3.5 litre supercharged V6 engine that makes 345 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 3.8 seconds. So despite only having the third most horses, it is by far the quickest car on the list. They're reminiscent of the TVR and that they're pretty stripped back to basics, with limited driver aids and comforts being the focus, and bucket seats, a lack of carpets, and an optional radio being the name of the game instead. My personal favourite part is the exposed gear linkages though, which do look lovely and combine well with how much carbon fibre this car gets, like with the rear, side intakes and other body parts. And as Lotus are now transitioning into being almost fully focused on electric cars and definitely more practical cars, the Exige might be one of the last of a generation of simple focus Lotuses that embody simplify then add lightness. These are on your own £42,000 at the bottom end, and 50k will get you a 2021 model that's done around 7,500 miles. That engine is known to be very solid, obviously helped by the fact that it's a Toyota. There are some known issues like noisy cooling fan bearings, some oil line leaks, and some owners have suffered stalling issues, but more importantly, as I've mentioned in previous videos, Lotuses often don't have too many parts from other manufacturers' parts bins, so replacement parts and repairs can be expensive as you're locked into Lotus's ecosystem. So there you have it, 5 exotics for under 50k that all look amazing and drive amazingly well too. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new. Huge thanks to the patrons for their support. You guys are all for watching, and click on screen to see my review of the Lotus Emira.